I haven't decided what to title this video yet. One-way liberation, maybe? So this this could be titled so many different things, but basically there was a podcast I was listening to, and the phrase got said, "There's no such thing as one-way liberation," which I don't like making blanket statements like that sometimes in certain contexts because it's not a factual thing. The spirit of what they were getting at, I'll explain. So, and I'm going to use some of the same examples that they used because they're really good examples, and that's kind of why I wanted to have the conversation. But it was this notion of like, if you are freeing yourself, if you are doing something to feel liberated and free, then you don't have to think about how that's going to negatively impact others, which I know is like a tough thing to maybe get around. But I'll explain that in a bit. So in some situations, if we move to the example that they did, so let's just go there right away. If you're in a relationship, and let's just start with just being in a relationship, right? That you think about your needs, you think about your partner's needs, I would hope, but at some point you might realize that your needs and your partner's needs are different, or your needs aren't being met, and you can't continue the relationship. And if you were thinking about liberating yourself, if you were thinking about freeing yourself from that scenario, that is what needs to be taken care of first, right? And so this notion of one-way liberation, meaning like, okay, well, I'm freeing myself and putting them at a disadvantage because they still want this relationship and I don't, and I'm going to be doing something, I'm negatively impacting them or causing harm to them or whatever. And this phrase of "there's no such thing as one-way liberation" is expressing that no, it's not in the long run going to cause them harm, that you are doing what you need to do. One way to look at it is that if you are freeing yourself from them, then you are freeing them from you. That if you are incompatible and you are not a good fit, then it's not going to be a good fit for them either if they're not a good fit for you, right? Like if it's not a good fit, like those two puzzle pieces don't fit together. Like that's it. They don't fit together. You can't say this one doesn't fit that one, but that one does fit this one. That doesn't really make sense. So those puzzle pieces need to be separated and be able to be available to fit with the right pieces that they find later. But the other example that they were talking about, I guess the main example they were talking about was having like being like a marriage situation or just like in a long-term relationship with a partner and there's kids involved. And they were talking about how like a lot of women especially think that they need to stay in relationships they don't want to be in because they think it'll be better to do that when there's kids involved. And I've never really thought that was a good idea. I've never really been a advocate for staying in a marriage that isn't working out to stay together for the kids. That's just not something I've been a proponent of. And I'm coming from a child of divorce as well, like an only child. And that divorce happened when I was about 4 years old. And yeah, it makes things more complicated. But I think that, I don't know, just really early on, I had the opinion that if two people are staying together that shouldn't be together, then it's going to be a bad environment for that child, right? Like it's not a good environment. Whereas if that separation can occur, you allow an opportunity for a better environment. And it doesn't mean that it's not complicated, but it's probably better than keeping two people together that aren't working. Like they don't work. And to stay together would also be complicated and would also be bad modeling. And that's where this one-way liberation thing comes in. Of like, if you are freeing yourself from a situation or you are empowering yourself or doing what's right for you, let's just call it that. If you are doing what's right for you, what's truly right for you, and it's not something that is putting someone else at a disadvantage, like it's not taking advantage of someone. It's not like, what would be right for me is to have $10,000 and I'm going to take that away from this person because I think it's right for me to have it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Like, again, if you're leaving a relationship or just changing jobs or going back to school, or I don't know, there's like so many things that are like, that's what you need to do to make that right move for you, that is going to be positive for you and a true good thing. Then that won't be at someone else's advantage, right? That if you're doing that, if what's right for you is to not be with that person, even though there's kids involved, and you model that behavior, that you have boundaries and you are willing to enforce those boundaries and you are willing to be strong enough to do what is best, then that is good modeling, right? And yes, it complicates things, and it may complicate things a lot in the short term and make things difficult in the short term. But when they talk about there's no such thing as one-way liberation, what they're talking about is that if you have liberated yourself, you are not sacrificing, like, oh, I'm leaving this relationship for myself, but what about the kids? And like, I'm doing harm to the kid. Like, again, it's the fact that if you are in the best position you could be in, then you are also available and free to be the best you can for them too. And that they can see that modeling of like, you are willing to do what you need to do for you, right? And I think a lot of people have trouble with this notion of selfishness and like sacrificing everything you have for someone else, whether it be a partner or kids or whatever. But it is healthy to have boundaries. It is healthy to know what they are and to exercise them and enforce them. And yes, that can complicate things sometimes because other people have different ideas and opinions and whatever of what those boundaries should be or how you should operate and who you should be and what you should do. But that, sorry, like, you know what I mean? Like that's on them. Like if people are putting boundaries on you, that's another issue, right? But yeah, the notion of just like being trapped in a place or feeling trapped because you don't want to harm others by freeing yourself doesn't do them any good. It certainly isn't doing you any good, and it's not doing them any good, so what is the point in staying? Because again, if you're modeling behavior, it's not like they can't see that things aren't working out, right? Them being like, if we're talking about this example with kids, right? Or if it's just an example with a partner, like if you are still there and they are there to, like, they're not available to have what they need, and maybe what they need isn't a partner, maybe what they need is to be alone, you know? And I'm sure in some situations you don't really care what your partner needs if you're already exited, at least emotionally, from the relationship. But the thing is that if you are freeing yourself from them, then you are freeing them from you as well. And they're able to go and do what they need to do to be their best person without you. And the same thing, again, you are able to free yourself from the situation and be the best you can be. And when you stay in certain relationships, you consent to a certain behavior or a certain habit or certain things that are happening that you don't, maybe you don't want those things to happen and you don't like them, but you continue to commit to them. You continue to choose to be in that position. And there is a certain amount of choice that you have. Like if someone is being abusive, then no, you'd rather they don't do that. You'd rather them just be better and be all these good things and not be that bad thing. But if they are behaving poorly, repetitively, you are choosing to give them that opportunity to also change, but to also not change. And therefore, you are consenting to a certain behavior. And that is also hard for people to swallow sometimes, and to see that. But I really like that notion of there is no such thing as one-way liberation, that if you are doing what is truly best for you and you are doing that thing, it might be a difficult thing, then it will show and it will model that good behavior of doing difficult tasks that will be what you need for a long term, that you are modeling that you can do hard things and you can change things and you can do what is really best for yourself and to take care of yourself. And I can't really see any fault in that. Again, or There's a certain amount of selfishness that I believe is healthy and needed. You should be thinking of yourself. How can you, that's the other thing, is how can you take care of others, or how can you operate in your job, or how can you be a good friend, or whatever the situation is? We have to interact with other people. And how can you do that if you can't take care of you? How you know? It's kind of difficult. And you know what I mean? If you've got friends that you're trying to be there for and you can't take care of yourself, and you are not in a good position to assist someone because you're unhealthy. I mean, it's just it definitely permeates the rest of your life and what you're capable of doing with your time and energy and emotional capacity. That if you are drained because you are not taking care of yourself, then it's going to affect your other relationships. So I don't know what to call this, but yeah, no such thing as one-way liberation. Let's just call it that, because it sounds complicated and like you might not know what it means. So that'll be fun.